morning, colleagues. I'm happy to present to you Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Mr. Dmytro Kuleba. He will make a few remarks in English and then a couple of words in Ukrainian, since we have Ukrainian TV here, and then we will wait in your questions. Mr. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I came here today to the United Nations to convey a very simple message that the attack by Russia on Ukraine is also the attack on the United Nations Charter. We heard the statement by the Secretary General of the United Nations, who pledged his support and commitment to defending the Charter and the principles that this organization stands for. He was immediately attacked by the Russian Federation, and this is exactly the demonstration of how Russia treats the UN. They want the United Nations to become the League of Nations, to follow the path of the League of Nations, to become obsolete. And it is high time for all members of the UN to stand together in defending the Charter, the principles, and the Secretary General of the UN. We know that the toolkit of the UN is a limited one, especially when a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, who has a veto right, can block any decision related to maintaining peace and security in the world. Nevertheless, we have to do our utmost to utilize every instrument at the disposal of the UN to prevent further military escalation and the war. And now I will say a couple of words in Ukrainian. Дорогі українці, сьогодні тут у ООН зібралися в буквальному сенсі всі країни світу, і вони чітко почули: перше, Україна прагне миру, але Україна готова захищатися. Друге, зараз в буквальному сенсі від кожної країни, члена ООН, залежить, чи буде зроблено все для того, щоб захистити світовий порядок і не допустити руйнування і дискредитації Організації Об'єднаних Націй з боку Росії. На жаль, Росія є постійним членом Ради безпеки, має право вето і буде намагатися блокувати будь-яку діяльність ООН. Але саме зараз настав той момент, коли ООН має продемонструвати лідерство. Я почув обнадійливу позицію Генерального секретаря ООН, його готовність боротися за ООН. І сподіваюся, що ця позиція надихне і багатьох співробітників організації, і держави-члени. І останнє. В 1994 році Україна відмовилася від свого ядерного арсеналу. Ми зробили неоціненний внесок в світову безпеку. Ніхто в світі більше такого не робив. І тому ми переконані, що сьогодні світ має як один стати на захист України і допомогти нам відстояти нашу незалежність, нашу територіальну цілісність, наш суверенітет. Кожна країна-член ООН має свою позицію, має свої національні інтереси, ми поважаємо це. Але немає такої держави-члена ООН, яка не може зараз надіслати чіткий сигнал в Москву, що ця війна не потрібна світові, і Росія має зупинитися. І саме до цього я закликав сьогодні Організацію Об'єднаних Націй. Ми також порушили декілька конкретних ініціатив, до яких могла б вдатися ООН та її держави-члени для стримування агресії, для запобігання війні. Серед інших це скликання саміту у форматі постійних членів Радбезу, плюс Україна, Туреччина, Німеччина. Зараз кожен дипломатичний інструмент має бути використаний для збереження миру. І ми будемо це робити щодня і щоночі. Дякую. Now I stand ready to take your questions.
Amanda, please.
Hi, Mr. Foreign Minister. Amanda Price from Al Jazeera English. Russia seemed to make very clear in the GA today that they don't see a role for the UN Secretary General's good offices in mediation. And as you said, Russia has a veto in the Security Council, which it could use on any resolution meant to send peacekeepers. So what realistically can the UN do beyond issuing strong statements? What are you expecting?
Well, that's exactly what I said. Today, Russia openly attacked Secretary General of the United Nations. And by doing so, it demonstrated that it attacks the United Nations as a whole. And I believe that all member states who share the principles of this organization in good faith should stand by Ukraine and should stand by Secretary General. You are absolutely right. UN can adopt resolutions, send messages, but unfortunately this is something that needs to be done, but this is something that would not be enough. So what could be practically done? First, the Secretary General should continue to demonstrate leadership. Second, the United Nations should consider the entire toolkit available to them that does not require approval by the UN Security Council and utilize these instruments available to them. One of them is the significant increase of humanitarian assistance to Ukraine under the circumstances. Second, we reminded the United Nations about our request of 20 and 15 to consider launching a peace operation in Ukraine. And there is a way to do that without the UN Security Council decision based on the UN General Assembly resolution. So I'm certain that if there is a will, there is a way. And we will be working with the United Nations on making sure that the will is there and we find the way to put pressure on Russia.
Minister, you got to talks with Americans yesterday. You met Secretary Blinken, you met President Biden. You never comment on that until now. Could you tell what is the main message you got from Americans?
The United both, not even both, but my three main counterparts, my three main interlocutors in Washington, President Biden, State Secretary Blinken, and Secretary of Defense Austin, they all conveyed three very clear messages. First, the United States will stand by Ukraine, whatever happens, whatever scenario Russia will prefer. Second, the United States will continue to provide Ukraine with defensive weapons to further build our capacity to defend our country. And I would like to assure you that we would be happy if we never have to pick up those weapons and use them in the battlefield. We want peace. But if Russia attacks, we have to be equipped to fight back. And the third message was that US sanctions will be continued. There will be more sanctions on Russia, more painful sanctions on Russia, and they will be done in close coordination with the allies, with the US allies in Europe and other parts of the world in order to ensure the maximum efficiency of these sanctions. So these are the political messages, but I assure you that in our talks we were very specific about the ways how these messages will be turned into actions in the coming days. And we appreciate, for example, the sanctions which were already imposed by the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, the European Union, some other countries, but this is not enough. And our partners should not wait for Russian rockets to hit Ukrainian soil or Russian planes to cross into our airspace to impose the new wave of sanctions. Sanctions make sense when they deter Russia from further action. So the time for the next wave of sanctions has come. We are in a very dynamic situation and every day matters.
Thank you, Stefano Vaccara, Voce di New York. This is a follow-up and another question. So can we say that you, after the meeting in Washington, you are satisfied, completely satisfied? Because there were reactions in Washington by the other party that say that President Biden was too weak in his reaction toward Russia. So I would like you to respond to this. And then today, what you heard so far, the speeches, there will be more, China will speak. Are you satisfied, the reaction? Is Russia isolated enough in this building at the moment?
I will be satisfied when the last Russian soldier withdraws from Ukrainian territory. Until it doesn't happen, I cannot be fully satisfied. But what we saw yesterday and the day before in Washington, in London, in Brussels, in Ottawa, was a clear demonstration that, that our partners understand clearly one simple fact. This is not only an attack on Ukraine. This is an attack on the existing world order. And the fact that they imposed the first wave of sanctions is appreciated. The decision of the German government to hold Nord Stream 2 is appreciated. But this is not enough to stop Putin. And this is why the message that I received yesterday in Washington, that what was already done is not the end of story, and more actions will be taken. And we will be looking forward to it. And my message is simple, that do not wait too long. You have to act now. Literally every day, decisions have to be adopted. More sanctions have to be imposed. More weapons have to be supplied. More diplomatic efforts have to be undertaken.
Mr. Minister, I would like to come back to UN topic actually, because since we're here. You already mentioned about the tools, practical tools that can be implemented by UN to help Ukraine. Can you be more specific about deadlines, about conditions when we can talk about, like, for example, strengths of humanitarian aid to Ukraine, or like peacekeeping missions that actually everybody is expected to see? Thank you.
Again, deadline for every action aimed at preventing the war is now. We all have our bureaucracies, national governments, international organizations. They are essentially bureaucratic structures, and we understand that there are procedures. So the sooner these procedures are launched, the better it is. The situation deteriorates every day, and no one can allow waiting until it's too late. As foreign minister, I do my best to avoid a situation when the world reacts to the war only after Ukrainian blood will be spilled. I do not want my compatriots to pay their lives and sufferings for the reluctance, for the cautiousness, for the inability to act by other governments or international organizations. This is why I'm saying clearly here in the United Nations, and I said it yesterday in Washington, we appreciate what has been done, but this is not enough. More needs to be done as soon as possible.
Foreign Minister, thank you so much for this availability. My question goes to the message that the Russian ambassador gave. At the end of his speech, he said that the Russian military will be in charge of peacekeeping, and they will not be softy with the violators. What can you say about that type of message, especially after the Secretary General was very clear about his concern of the use of the word peacekeeping to refer to the Russian military on the Donbas area?
I think the Secretary General should come out and say a very simple thing. Russia must stop abusing the word peacekeepers and the concept of peacekeeping enshrined in the United Nations Charter. This is exactly what we are talking about. Russia tries to replace the UN with itself. They want to have a free hand to decide how to maintain peace, the way they want to maintain peace. And usually when they say that we want to maintain peace, they speak about another act of aggression. And the use of the word peacekeepers may work for Russian audience, but it shouldn't mislead the world. And the world should clearly debunk this disinformation and speak openly. This is the time to call spade a spade. Speaking about classic diplomatic narratives do not work anymore. Calling on both sides to de-escalate or making statements not mentioning Russia doesn't help anyone except Russia, because it creates space for Russia to move forward and to come to a conclusion that in the end everything will be fine. Because if they are afraid to call us by name now, under these critical circumstances, then they will tolerate any kind of behavior. But again, I will repeat it, the fact that you mentioned about the reference to peacekeepers, it's another manifestation of Russia's ignorance, of Russia ignoring the United Nations, of Russia attacking the fundamental concepts of the United Nations. And I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying that what Russia is doing now is an attempt to make the United Nations follow the path of the League of Nations. We all saw it in history. And it's for our generation who learned history, who read history books, who know diplomacy, to avoid the repetition of this scenario. No one can say now this has never happened before. We didn't realize where it would take us to. There will be no such excuse. Everyone perfectly understands what is happening here. And the attack on the Secretary General by the Russian ambassador is unprecedented. And if the United Nations tolerate such an attack, it will be only the United Nations who will suffer the most and who will end up discredited and unrespected.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Foreign Minister, and thank you for this availability, and welcome to New York. There has been a lot of concern about how President Biden described the invasion by Russia, calling it the start of an invasion. Just to follow up to what you mentioned, did you talk to him about how he might have moved the goalpost in imposing sanctions on Russia, how for months he threatened to impose those hard-hitting sanctions, and now there is talk that perhaps throwing Russia out of the SWIFT financial system might be out of the question? That was the nuclear option. And my second question is, after what you heard from the Russians today at the United Nations General Assembly, under what circumstance would you sit down at the same table with your Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, for some kind of negotiation about this matter? Thank you.
As far as I understand President Biden, his idea is to impose sanctions by waves. And we accept this approach. But what I said to the President yesterday, what I said to other interlocutors and during my meetings here in the United Nations, is that these waves should come one after another. Again, we appreciate decisions already taken, but they're not enough to prevent Russia from changing their mind, to prevent President Putin from changing their mind. This is not enough. And we should not allow Russia the slightest possibility to think that the unbearable sanctions which were promised to them will be bearable. Now, on Minister Lavrov, I was appointed as Foreign Minister in March 2020, and since then there were numerous attempts to arrange our meeting in Normandy formats. I reach out to speak bilaterally on the phone to him, but he never picks up the phone. He never agreed to meet in the Normandy format. He is talented enough to find all kinds of excuses why he shouldn't show up. So I don't care about him. If he is ready to convince President Putin to stop this madness, we are ready to sit down. I'm open. If he just follows if he just reinforces the narratives of President Putin and chooses war to diplomacy, that's his choice. That's his choice, and he will pay for that.
Hello, I'm Kaori Yoshida from Nikkei, Japanese business news. Japan, along with some Western nations, have imposed sanctions on Russia over Ukraine. There are a lot of Japanese media here today. Could we get a reaction from you on these movements and for the announcement of potential additional sanctions by Japan?
We expect a stronger reaction by Japan and a stronger action by Japan for a number of reasons which I'm not going to elaborate on today. I believe Japan must be vitally interested in not allowing Russia to crush the existing world order based on rules, and not to demonstrate by its example to others that this is a path of success, and the one who dares eventually succeeds. And these are the global consequences of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Because if we are not able to defend very simple fundamental principles in Europe, it means that we are not able to defend them in any other part of the world. So a stronger reaction by Japan is most welcome. And I understand that some countries may think this is not our fight. We have to wait and see how it ends up. Some believe that we have excellent relations with Russia. Why should we put them at stake? But this is not about Ukraine. This is really about the destruction of the world order. And every nation who has this kind of considerations should understand simple fact. Now Russia tries to behave nicely to them, to keep them under control and avoid additional pressure coming from new corners. But if Russia succeeds, the next step for Russia will be to build their relations with those countries from a dominant position, because they will demonstrate that this is what we are capable to do, and this is where we are capable, we can be successful. So every country should be mindful of that consequence. Russia may smile to you today, like they did with Minsk agreements. For 7 years they were convincing everyone that Minsk agreements is the only and fundamental basis for diplomatic solution. They were saying on every corner that Minsk agreements were endorsed by the UN Security Council resolution. This is a sacred document that everyone has to focus on. But one morning they changed their plan and they abandoned everything. It's crazy. A permanent member of the United Nations Security Council killed the document endorsed by the United Nations Security Council resolution, which they supported and had been convincing everyone to follow it. So the mood, the attitude can change in a day, and every country should understand that. Every country should understand that making compromises comes at a price to all. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Stay safe.